Did you feel like you were listened to, that your feedback was taken on board? Some residents in South Perth are pretty frustrated today. They feel let down by the planning process in their neighbourhood. But I'm sure the Minister has a different view, and she'll answer her critics next.
Earlier this morning you heard about the high-rise development called Civic Heart that's been approved for the South Perth Peninsula. And it's a prime spot right on the freeway entrance at the corner of Labouchere Road and Mill Point Road. So it's supposed to be an iconic building and it will stand out. There are two towers. One will be 39 stories high, the other 22. But unbelievably, height for once is not the main issue here. Some residents have deep misgivings about the way it will look and the impact it will have on local traffic, but they feel like their feedback has been ignored when the Minister took over the planning process and used her discretion to approve the project herself. This is Vicky Redden, who will live just a few hundred metres from this development.
I was appalled. I can't believe that the Minister has done this. She's used her political discretion to override experts and used her opinion where she doesn't have expertise or experience. It's just appalling. She should take advice from the government architect. They said it wasn't good enough. It wasn't iconic. It didn't meet the criteria.
What are your fears in terms of the impact this construction will have on local traffic?
Oh, you won't get in and out of South Perth. Once this is built and there's lots of people in here, you won't get in and out of it. It will cause congestion. It's going to be an absolute nightmare. We were already doing really well. You know, that area of South Perth Peninsula has had enormous increase in density over years and years and years. This is complete overdevelopment. You know, when I live in an apartment, lots of the people in our groups all live in apartments. We're the epitome of what the government wants people to do, and yet when we're trying to work with them to make things better, you know, they ask for our feedback, they want all our thoughts and ideas and opinions. We go to all these meetings, they slap us in the face and throw something like this in our face.
Vicky Redden, a South Perth resident and part of the Peninsula Action Group. So is that true? Does the system ignore community feedback, or is this a case of sour grapes? Maybe you can tell us your experience, 1300 222 720. Right now, though, let's get a response from the Planning Minister herself. Rita Safiotti joins us. Good morning, Minister.
Good morning, Russell and Nadia. How are you?
Really well, thanks. Do you really not take on board the feedback you get from residents?
Absolutely not, and I reject the claims made by Vicky. If we go through the history of this site was sold by the City of South Perth around 7 years ago for an iconic development. Since that time, there was an approval for a project about 37 stories. That didn't proceed. The City of South Perth initiated a scheme amendment to facilitate a new development, and this is the development that is before us. So this has been through about 7 years of discussion and consultation. It's been assessed by the City of South Perth administration to go ahead. It was also recommended to proceed by the City of South Perth Design Review Panel. So this has been going on for many, many years, and this particular development was recommended by the administration of the City of South Perth and then by the Design Review Panel. And there were a number of amendments that were made to the design to increase its design excellence. So I think it's been a long time on the table, and there had to be a decision made, and ultimately I've made that decision.
This was, though, rejected by the Joint Development Assessment Panel twice, and these are your own experts. Your own government architect said this design wasn't special enough, it wasn't iconic enough. So on that basis, why do you approve it? What do you see that is iconic in this building?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, it's in relation to who has the power to make those decisions in relation to whether something is iconic or the type of design. The other key issue was that as part of this decision, I've also required amendments to the design, in particular the area of concern, which was the podium, and the amount of sort of the green wall that is being incorporated. So I haven't just accepted the design that was put forward. We've put forward some amendments in particular about the podium, where there was the most significant concern.
So what do you mean when you're talking about the podium? What do you mean
so
exactly
the first few levels of the building. So basically, and that's really the interface between the person walking along the street. So it's normally about the bottom 3 or 4 stories of the building, the one that's probably bulkier and that comes out to the street. And so what we've done there is required modifications to that to improve its design excellence.
The residents, well, we spoke to Vicky and she's disturbed that originally there were plans for a supermarket that no longer exists. She says that it's just an average-looking building. It's not iconic. She says traffic is going to be a nightmare in that area. Yet you seem to have just dealt with all of that yourself with some discretionary power that you have as Planning Minister.
And so I just deal with it myself. I take advice from all the relevant authorities. I went back to the City of South Perth, the JDAP and the developer. And in relation to the approval, it's very similar to what was put forward by the City of South Perth and approved by the administration of the City of South Perth. So it's not as if it's some sort of unilateral sort of process. It's just the end of what has been, in a sense, a 7-year process. And in relation to the project, I think it's a project that that site was always earmarked by the City of South Perth to be the site that would carry, in a sense, one of the key buildings for South Perth. I might also add that, in the vicinity or a bit further along the peninsula, there's been other buildings approved, around 34 stories, around 38, around 24. So there's been those other buildings approved too. So this isn't extraordinary. This is basically a part of what has been a long-running planning process.
Rita Saffioti is our guest. She's the Planning Minister. And the height's not the issue, though. And we talked about some of the amenities that they said was promised to make it, to really activate the area around it, to have all that foot traffic. And the biggest complaint has been the supermarket's gone. Where's the supermarket?
Well, again, I'm not responsible for, in a sense, for the fit out of the building, and there's some. But you're passing this. You're the one that's approved this. Surely your approvals have got to be based on the kind of shops, the kind of retail, whatever will be in there. Shouldn't that be part of what you look at? There's commercial offerings on the bottom, so in relation to the interaction with the public, there's commercial, restaurants and other sort of aspects. So that's what's been offered. That's what's included in the plans. In relation to the shopping centre, I think that was part of the original plan that was put forward, but then that development approval lapsed a number of years ago because of issues to do with the parking. So look, in relation to if the residents want a shopping centre, they can go and maybe talk to the developers and see what can happen in relation to there. But ultimately, this is something, as I said, that's been on the books for 7 years. That there were approvals very similar to this given before, and they lapsed because issues to do with the basement parking. So this is not something that is completely a surprise. It's been, like I said, around for about 7 years.
People will know that a minister has discretionary power with something like this, but, I suppose people are thinking it's likely to be used in an emergency situation of some kind, but the people are accusing you of abusing your power. How do you respond to that?
Well, I reject that totally. This is, like I said, this is an area that was set aside by the City of South Perth, about 7 years ago as an area of significance. So, it's quite... Look, I find some of the comments made this morning actually abusive, and I reject them totally. There are other buildings that have been approved in that area, and they seem to not worry about those. So I just find some of the commentary completely... shouldn't be tolerated because they're just personal abuse, and ultimately I'm doing my job making sure that we can create jobs, that we end uncertainty, and that developments that have been on the table for years can proceed.
I appreciate your time this morning. Rita Saffioti there, the Planning Minister. Well, you've had a listen. Tell us what you think. 1300 222 720. G'day, Ian.
Oh, hello. Thanks for taking my call. Yeah, look, just on the issue of abuse of power, and I don't think it's a personal attack at all, and I think the Minister just said it right there. A lot of these developments are about creating jobs and not necessarily about supplying good housing for West Australians. She does have the discretion under Section 16 of the Development Act, but there's also the sort of Misconduct Act, Section 4, which says if the minister's acted without impartiality, that she's abused her power. Now, just because something's on the table for a long time, or it's been on the books for a long time, or the minister gets frustrated with lack of progress to her liking, doesn't mean she can just do what she likes.
That doesn't necessarily mean she's being impartial either.
Well, she needs to act impartially. So if she has not acted impartially, then that is a serious. That's what's called a serious misconduct.
And she's arguing that she took advice, that she just didn't make that decision off the top of her head. She argues, that she took advice.
That's fair, but I would say she's cherry-picked the advice.
Yep.
So she's ignored the design review panels. She's and she cherry-picks what she likes. And this is not just about South Perth. This is across the whole of Perth. We're talking Wembley, West Leederville, Applecross, Subiaco, Kalamunda, Nedlands. Scratch the surface of any of these communities and you'll find this abuse of power is across the state.
Ian, thank you so much.
Yeah, it's nice to talk to you, Ian.
We'll try and take some more of your calls and texts after 9 o'clock, and we'll also take you to Christmas Island for the latest.